have you seen this video, this Ring video?
I have not, no.
Okay, well, it appears around 9 a.m. The morning she disappeared. What do you make of this video and the importance for the timeline?
Well, first of all, I think it shows what kind of person she was, that she was always doing these random acts of kindness. Secondly, I think it establishes a firm timeline. We also know from a lady who boarded horses with Dia at her Toolbox Springs property that she spoke and saw Dia that morning, that Saturday morning that Dia disappeared. So from that, and then Diane Fetter said that she spoke with Dia and either spoke with or texted and Facebooked with Dia around 1 p.m. regarding a window washing referral that Dia was asking about. So
well, to date, this whole timeline of her disappearance has kind of been, for the most part, reliant on Keith Harper's statement, but at least this is an independent verification.
Yeah.
He was alive that morning.
It's an actual video verification that she was alive Saturday morning. From the people I've spoken to, she's always, in my mind, that the timeline has been relatively firm that she was alive Saturday morning.
Okay, hold on this plane. Can you talk a little bit more about this video? Kind of captures maybe her last act of kindness, right? Random act of kindness.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, it just shows that she was always doing these kinds of things and always really caring and considerate, and her neighbor wasn't feeling well. And my understanding is that her neighbor said that what she really felt like eating were cinnamon rolls, and that she had had cancer or was undergoing chemotherapy, and so my mother baked her cinnamon rolls that morning. And it's one of the things about my mother that a lot of people don't realize, is that she was always generous and always doing these kinds of things, but you know, she didn't make a show of it or tell anybody about it. So it would be easy to miss somebody who, you know, didn't know her that well necessarily.
So was your mom a kind person?
Extremely kind, yeah, generous, kind, giving.
Okay. What do you make of this reported lead in Arizona? Does that give you hope? I mean, a lead in Arizona, like all leads have been exhausted, but this new lead in Arizona.
Yeah, I think it's a very strange statement, personally, because my sense of Alberto, the head detective, is that he wouldn't say such things, but you know, it could have been said in concert. They might have decided to make that statement, I don't know. My personal opinion is that she's not in Arizona or across state lines. I don't think, according to the timeline that I understand, and I believe this to be true because of my sources I trust completely, she went missing that Saturday evening. That's when Harper first began to reach out to various people and kind of put out general feelers and start to insinuate that Dia was not around or he couldn't locate Dia. And then that Sunday morning, people showed up and began searching. And these are higher end people. For example, Diane Fetter being ex-Secret Service, and Keith Harper himself being a retired parole agent, or whatever he claims to have been, and also other people that were, I believe, friends of Dia, or they claim they're friends of Dia, that are highly trained in various like reconnaissance and surveying land and these kind of efforts, and also her neighbors who run a camp, and they train people in search and rescue. So all of these people came Sunday, and she wasn't found.
3 years after your mom's disappearance, 3 years after she went missing. What are your thoughts 3 years later?
My thoughts are that I can't believe that it hasn't been solved. I can't believe that people haven't spoken up and come out with the truth, because I know a lot of people actually know what happened. And my personal belief is that the FBI should be invoked and involved. My understanding is that the FBI, lying to the FBI in and of itself is a crime. And I think if Riverside Sheriff's Department called in the FBI to interrogate these people and ask the tough questions. I think they'd have to give straight answers and the truth would come out immediately. I've tried to involve the FBI, but they say that they can't get involved unless local law enforcement requests their help.
Well, it's a crime to lie to any law enforcement officer, but this lead in Arizona seems to indicate that they're looking across state lines, and when things cross state lines, sometimes the FBI gets involved.
Yeah, that would make sense to me. If they've exhausted all leads and it's gone across state lines, why hasn't the FBI been called in? And maybe they have, I hope they have, and we just don't know anything about it, but that's my earnest hope.
Yeah, what you think Riverside Sheriff has done a good job with this?
I really like and respect the lead detective, Alberto Loureiro. I think he's done a tremendous job. I really have, and I'm really grateful for the search that they put on when Dia went missing that Monday. They really came out in full force. I think Alberto is a really exemplary detective, and my private investigators have said so themselves. I think he needs more resources, however.
How much have you spent on private detectives? Give me a ballpark figure.
A lot of money, in the hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of thousands of
Yeah.
dollars from your own family's money.
Yeah. We've hired airplanes to do ground penetrating radar and various aerial surveys of the entire area to see if there's any kind of disturbance in the land to determine whether or not that would have been where somebody potentially could have disposed of Dia and other such quite expensive undertakings to no avail, unfortunately.
300,000. Go ahead.
But what I really want to say is that multiple people searched the RV, and we know this before Keith Harper left that Monday morning. And I believe their testimony that they didn't see any blood or Dia or anything remotely of the sort in the RV before he left. I think Keith Harper fled to create a diversion, a decoy, and a wild goose chase with law enforcement. And I think as long as we believe that Dia was in the RV, this is my personal belief, we'll continue to be fooled as to where her ultimate resting place actually is.
Well, if we disregard Keith Harper's timeline because we think he's a suspect, we have her alive at about 9 in the morning,
Yeah.
Saturday, and the search didn't begin until the next morning. Maybe somebody came by or something Saturday afternoon, but the search, he had all day Saturday to dispose of the body if Keith Harper is the suspect.
Yeah, well, my personal opinion is that Keith Harper had a lot of help. I don't think that this was a one-man job. I think it's too complex. I think it was done too perfectly. I think Dia was kidnapped that Saturday, taken to another location, murdered, and disposed of somewhere in the relative local vicinity of her property. I don't think that her body was stored only later to have been loaded into an RV and transported many hundreds of miles to be disposed of at a different location.
What's the status of the $300,000 reward?
Well, that can't, the $300,000 reward can't come out quickly enough for me, and it should be very expediently processed by the court and put out. I would expect in the very, very short term. I can't give an exact timeline, but my hope is that for $300,000, somebody up there will be incentivized to either provide the location of where Dia is or provide evidence and information that leads to a conviction regarding who's responsible for her disappearance.
Who do you think is responsible for her disappearance? I mean, the obvious suspect, and even he himself in his deposition admits that he's a suspect.
I think Keith Harper is unequivocally involved, but I think there are more people. I think there are people with better brains involved. I don't think he's intelligent enough, wily enough, strong enough, and clever enough to pull this off single-handedly.
What's it going to take to solve this case 3 years later?
I think it's going to take the invocation of higher law enforcement. I think the FBI, the Department of Justice, needs to get involved because I think it's organized crime. I really do. I think this is highly premeditated, highly coordinated, highly planned, and executed by highly skilled individuals And that's why we aren't getting answers, and I think we won't get answers so long as we continually fall victim to a one-dimensional view of the crime, and we don't actually lean on and summon the help of higher authorities.
Haven't your private investigators concluded that all roads lead to Keith Harper?
All roads lead to Keith Harper, plus more. So Keith Harper, in my mind, unequivocally is the linchpin. He is the fulcrum in this. But there are other people far more skilled than him that were able to commit a crime in such a way that it confounds currently law enforcement.
Okay. What's your message to the community regarding this crime, its effect on your family, and can you urge people to come forward with information?
Yeah, people need to come forward because I don't think anybody realizes the extent of the blast radius of this crime and how many people it affects. I mean, I speak to people every day, text people every day. They want updates. They want to know what's going on, what's being done. And I think they've become a little bit frustrated, more than a little bit frustrated with Riverside Sheriff's Department's lack of engagement. But I understand that they have to protect the integrity of their investigation, so I'm sympathetic to their plight. However, I think that the community needs to solve this crime in order to get rid of a tumor, essentially a giant negative shadow on their whole entire area.
Do you think her body is going to have to be found before they can make an arrest in this case?
That I don't know. That's something that's...
It would certainly make a big difference.
It would, yeah. I mean, if
I mean, it throws out the possibility that she just disappeared of her own accord, took off, or committed suicide. What do you make of those kind of theories?
Well, I don't think that they necessarily have to have a body to make an arrest. I think that we've seen that locally in San Diego with, I might mispronounce her name, but Maya Millete.
Right.
And so I don't necessarily think that there has to be a body found. I think somebody has to speak up, definitely. I think a lot of people know what has happened. Obviously, my deepest hope is that we find Dia's remains and that the mystery doesn't continue to dwell and fester in the hearts of myself, my family, and everybody who wants to know what happened.
And then when 2025 rolls around, if there's no progress, the estate gets split up, right?
That's my understanding according to the court. I don't want that to happen because obviously I think a large chunk of that falls into the hands of the enemy. And so I urgently and desperately want this case to be solved every day, but definitely prior to the 5-year mark.